Looks like everybody has joined us now, so thank you for that. As I mentioned, I'm Paris Prokopis. I'm the account manager here at MIG. And welcome to our Dynamics GP on Microsoft Azure webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. If you would like to listen through your computer, mic, and speakers and use voice over IP, you can do so. Otherwise, if you want to dial in, you can also dial in using the information provided. And then during this webinar, you are free to submit any questions and comments via the questions panels, and we will have a Q&A session after the presentation is over. And here's a real quick agenda on what we're going to be covering today. We're going to talk a little bit about us, who MIG is, and introduction to Azure, followed by a live demo, and then finally our question and answer period. First of all, a little bit about us. MIG specializes in the implementation of financial and business management systems. The solutions that we work with are Microsoft Dynamics GP, SL, CRM. We also work with Microsoft SharePoint and Business Intelligence. And we have well over 15 years of experience in the business, and our focus is mainly mid-market and enterprise customers. MIG possesses various certifications. We are a Microsoft Gold certified partner. We're also registered with the BBB, and we are a GSA approved vendor for any government clients, and also you can take our webinars for CPE credit. And now I'm going to introduce you to Scott Spearman. He's one of our consultants here at MIG. And he'll take it from here and show you all about Azure.
Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Scott Spearman. I am an IT systems engineer. I've been doing this for about 23 years and have been doing support of GP for even longer, and well, no, excuse me, for about 10 years. And I am want to show you today about Azure and running GP in the cloud, and make sure you have a good understanding of Azure, what it is, how it works, and how you can run Azure in the cloud and run GP in the cloud and get a lot of benefits. So, okay. So I'm going to switch over now and show you my screen. Okay. There we go. All right. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
I see a blue screen.
Okay, good. I'm actually going to... Okay, so what I'd like to do is show you now, I'm going to bring up that same PowerPoint that I just, Paris was showing you, and sort of go over what Azure is and what benefits you can get from it.
Scott, we're just seeing a blue screen.
Okay, yeah, I'm actually trying to, switch that. I don't know why the screen sharing is doing that, but I'm going to, I'd actually like to, switch the screen. It was working just a minute ago. Paris, I'm going to move it back over to you for just a minute and then take it right back, okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so if you will take control, and I want to try this again. Okay, I'm going to do Now, there we go. That I think is going to work better. Okay, now you should actually see my desktop. Is that right?
Yep, now it's working fine.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to this presentation that it's the same one that Paris is running, but I'm going to and go to my portion of that. And slideshow, current slide. Okay, so the question is, what is Azure? And Azure is about 4 years old. It's Microsoft's cloud computing platform. They're adding to what Azure is every day. So my answer today is going to be different from what it is tomorrow, but it's basically a growing collection of services running in data centers all around the world that provides analytics, computing, databases, mobile apps, networking, storage, websites, and it's all built on a platform that makes it easy to run and deploy applications, websites, and it's deployed in such a way to allow you to do that faster and more easily, and in a way that gives you the flexibility to save money. So in a nutshell, that's what Azure is. It's Microsoft's cloud computing platform, and I've been working with it for 3 years now. It's I have also worked with other cloud computing platforms, and when I first started using Azure, I was basically amazed at how well done it is. I do want to point out that whenever you hear people talk about cloud services, that it's going to be very common for you to hear people talk about IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. And I just want to sort of make sure you have a good understanding of exactly what that is. If you looked at your current on-premises environment, there you've got everything. If you don't have anything in the cloud, then you're running everything from your servers, virtualization, whether they're bare metal servers or virtualized servers, all your applications, your data, your databases, your executables to run all your applications, storage, networking, all being done by you on premise. What you get with cloud computing is the ability to move some, or even, as we'll talk about, all of those services to the cloud. So when you hear people talk about IaaS, you're talking about infrastructure as a service. And what you have there is basically running computers, virtual machines, if you will, providing an infrastructure like you're familiar with, but providing it in the cloud. So you're able to run, you're able to set up and run servers and cloud services so that you can move those servers and run them in the cloud. So if you look at the diagram here, you've got with infrastructure as a service, you're adding, you're able to set up infrastructures. That means networks, servers, domain controllers, anything that you run in servers in your on-premise environment, you can run. You can run as infrastructure as a service in the cloud. Platform as a service basically means it's kind of it's a built-in service that provides the ability to run specific applications. In platform as a service, you only run the application and you don't have to worry about the infrastructure. The best and sort of glaring example of platform as a service with Azure is SQL Server. They have Azure SQL services that allows you to set up a SQL environment without having to actually manage SQL servers. But there's also Active Directory as part of platform as a service. And then you even have the ability in Azure to set up entire self-managed software services that where everything is handled in the cloud. Probably the best and most well-known example of software as a service is Office 365. Everything's in the cloud, and you don't have to do anything except use the app. And so that sort of gives you an idea of what you have. With Azure, you have all three of these. They're split up into various services and applications, but you have access to all of these. You should know that the recommendation we're making today as I talk about how to set up GP in the cloud is it's all going to be built under the infrastructure as a service. So the question is, what is the value proposition you get by moving, by doing something in Azure? You get cost reduction, the ability to reduce your costs in operations and management. One of the main ways that you get this is because if you're not paying for something, in the case of your on-premise environment, if you have a server, you bought it, it's part of your assets, and you may not be using it, and you bought it and you paid for it, but you're not getting your value out of it. In the case of Azure, you're not paying for anything except what you use. And so you get a lot of value by only deploying, only provisioning that which you need. And so there's a real value in being able to just use what you need. And so an example I give, or an illustration I give, is I worked with a company that needed to have a major infrastructure upgrade. They were moving, there was a company that was growing, and they were kind of moving from having small little servers in a closet to needing to grow up and have a real server room with real data operations, and the cost to do that, to actually do that upgrade, it was a couple of $100,000, and it took months of planning and project management, and that sort of, and then it turns out that they wanted this infrastructure to last for a really long time, so they really bought more storage than they needed, more servers than they needed, and it turned out that that it worked well for them. But I thought about that particular project and thought, well, in Azure I could have done that project in a few days or a week and provided them only what they needed and make it so that they can have more. So the other thing you get is risk reduction. Microsoft is very, very focused in security and risk reduction. They know everything about it. They've been dealing with security for a long time, and they've dealt with every aspect of security, including physical security at their data centers, and then making sure that they've designed the infrastructure at Azure to minimize risk, to close any vectors in terms of bad guys trying to get in, and frankly, they take away a lot of what you might have to deal with. They've already set up the infrastructure and they manage it, and so a move to Azure automatically gives you sort of Microsoft's expertise in security. You get agility and flexibility. You provision what you need as you need it. As I said, this allows you, if you have a new project and you need something, you need some servers and you needed them yesterday, you can have them, well, not yesterday unless we invent a time machine, but you can have it today though, and you can have just what you need, just the amount of RAM, just the amount of CPU, and the accessibility that you need. So, and actually accessibility is another point. When I mention availability, the thing is the servers in the cloud are always on, and unless you don't want them to be. They're available from anywhere, and that makes moving and making your line of business applications accessible kind of all the time. It makes it a lot easier. And then you have scalability with Azure. You can grow or shrink as needed. And one of the real value adds that you get with Azure, where I think Microsoft's done a phenomenal job, is making it easy to integrate with your existing environment. So it's called a hybrid environment, and if you have a domain, you've already got all your users and passwords, and you want to make it easy so that they can then connect to an application in Azure. It's actually, I won't say trivially easy, but it's easy to make it so that Active Directory in Azure is synchronizing with Active Directory in your existing infrastructure. And I think that's one of the biggest value adds that Microsoft provides in Azure compared to some of the other cloud services. So the question is, why move GP specifically to Azure? And the answer is that, well, how about everything I just said? You know, the question I would answer back is, why wouldn't you want these benefits for what is probably your most important line of business application? If you can get cost reduction, risk reduction, security, the agility to grow or shrink as needed, to be available from anywhere, anytime, that will easily integrate with your existing environment, you know, why wouldn't you do that? So, just to talk about, I'm going to move a little bit more into technically what is required to actually move GP to Azure. And at a minimum, you need a SQL server, and you need the GP client. I'll talk in more detail about this, but with the SQL server in the back end and a GP client, which in almost every case, the deployments I've done, is the client's going to be actually running in a remote desktop session host server that your users access. It has a direct connection on a private subnet to the SQL server on the back end, which is not accessible directly from the internet. It's only accessible from other servers in that subnet. And then from there they go on. So I'll show you more about this. But really, at a minimum, you want your SQL server and your GP client, but you also want more. You want reporting. You want insight into your business. So typically, if MIG is going to deploy GP in Azure, we're going to do everything we can to add the tools you need, like Management Reporter or SQL Server reporting services, so that you do get the insight into your business that you need. Okay, so a little bit more then about those technical requirements. If you were to actually set up, or if we were to actually set up GP in Azure for you, you would need an Azure subscription. It takes 3 minutes to set one up. You could go and do that right now. And then there's some things once you got your subscription created that you would need to set up. You'd need to set up what's called a storage account. A storage account allows you to, it's your storage. It's where your disks on the virtual machines. There are several different kinds of storage. There's blob storage, there's file storage, there's table storage, and each of those has a different use depending on what you're doing it for. But generally, we'll set up a storage account. Most of the storage is just going to be kind of standard blob storage. And then you set up your storage account, and you set up your machines. At a minimum, you need a domain controller, because we always try to deploy tools like Management Reporter. They require domain authentication. So we're going to set up a domain controller. The thing I'll say about that is that we can set up a really small, tiny virtual machine that only costs a few dollars a month that can be your domain controller. And then we're going to install a SQL server. We'll look at the Microsoft, we will look at your requirements, how many users do you have, how large are your databases, how many transactions do you have going on a regular basis, and then we'll size a proper SQL server. We'll provision the SQL server in Azure, and then you need your users to be able to connect. And our typical method for doing that is we would do a client server, usually a remote desktop session host server, and that is going to run remote desktop and have GP and Office and all the tools that you need to be able to run your line of business application in GP. So you will then we'll set that up, and then we'll give the users access by creating domain accounts for them, and they will connect from wherever they are using remote desktop, and then they will launch GP and do their work. So that's how GP is set up in Azure. We require 3 servers, one very small server, the domain controller, and then the SQL server and the remote desktop server sized according to your needs. So okay. So anyway, that's the technical requirements, and what I want to do now is do the demo. I'm gonna go out of full screen here, and I just want to spend some time showing you a few things. I want to show you Azure as you can manage it on the web, and show you just give you a basic orientation to Azure. Talk about some things that you can do to save money. If you want to do that, you have a lot of automation which can provide that service for you. And also talk a little bit about pricing. Azure has a tool. If GP were to do your migration to Azure project, we would provide you with a estimate, and we can I want to show you the places, show you how some of the tools that we would use for that. So I am going to log into now. I have just for demo and lab, sort of a lab, I have my own Azure subscription, which is actually what I'm going to be using. Just to kind of give you an idea, when you go into Azure, I don't know how many of you have seen Azure before, but you're going to log in, and Azure, by the way, I like Google Chrome, and the Azure application works great in Chrome. It also works great in IE. So, I'm going to go ahead. I've actually logged into Azure. I've got I think something I want to point out is they're actually transitioning to a new interface. This is portal.azure.com. So once you have your subscription, you log in. This is one place, but there's actually another, this manage.windowsazure.com. And I have found that I kind of use both sometimes, depending on what I'm doing. There's some things like if I'm creating a new virtual machine that I have options here in the old portal in the management window that they haven't added yet to the new portal. So typically I'll create new virtual machines here. And so you go in, you create a subscription. You can almost immediately, less than 5 minutes, you can actually be in here in Azure looking at everything. So it might be a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff that I don't even have time to talk about. We could talk about integration services like BizTalk or CDN, which distributes your application all around the world in the locations closest to your customers, and And I will mention automation and the scheduler, because that's actually important to help you manage your costs. And then there's some pretty like machine learning and a lot of tools here, and we won't go into all of them, but I'm going to go instead to the focus on the infrastructure as a service, which is really the compute environments. So I'm going to go to virtual machines, and I want to show you just real quick, one demo I want to show is how easy it is to set up your infrastructure, set up a new virtual machine as an example. So I'm going to go to New and Compute, Virtual Machine. I'm going to do one from the gallery because it's super quick. And just say I was creating a new, I don't know, remote desktop server. So I'm going to just put in remote. There we go. Windows Server, remote desktop session host. So I'm going to select that. Click on the arrow and do next. Put in demo 1. I should mention that there's the compute tiers allow you to choose the exact sizing of the virtual machine that you're setting up, and there's two. There's basic and standard. Basic. It has the same service level agreement as the standard. So Microsoft, by the way, in Azure guarantees 99.95% uptime. That's true for both of these tiers. There's some things that you don't get in the basic tier in that you've got a little bit less lower end machine in the basic tier. You've also the IOPS, the I/O operations per second for the basic tier is 300. For the standard, it's 500. So it's a little bit faster machine. Microsoft sort of, quote, sells the basic tier is good for like test and development environments, and it is a bit cheaper. We'll look at some of the pricing stuff later, and I'll show you that. And so in this case, this is a remote desktop server. It has got to be a decently large machine. I'm not picking A0, but an A3 might work for a small company that only has 3 or 4 users. But you can scale way up to machines that cost thousands of dollars a month, 16 cores, 112 gigs of RAM, or let me see, the biggest one is 32 cores, 448 gigs of memory. I'm not going to select that one because I max out my credit card really fast. So I'm going to select this standard A3 machine. I'm going to go ahead and give it a name and a password. Too common. I shouldn't have done that. And it's going to ask me if I want to create a new cloud service. Okay, I can't use this demo 1 name because it's already in existence. I'm not surprised. I'm going to call it MIG-demo. There we go. And I'm going to now cloud service. I won't go into what it is. It's actually pretty useful. It has to do though with the external public access to your servers and applications. I would typically set up a new cloud service as part of a GP deployment, but and I'm going to do that this time. The default is that the cloud service name is going to be the same as the server name, the computer name. So I'm going to select my region. I typically do East US 2, and I'm going to select a storage account. And availability sets, by the way, is what is required if you're going to, if you want you want to have automatic failover. You have to put servers in an availability set, and it's going to go ahead and create this machine so that I have remote access to it, which is nice. But I'm not going to choose an availability set. So I'm going to go ahead and go in, create that. There's stuff that you can install, additional stuff, antivirus. It by default installs the VM agent that gives the Azure sort of the remote control utilities built into the virtual machine. It also installs something called BG Info, which is really nice. It's whenever you launch the server, it puts on the desktop the name and the uptime, the IP address, and stuff like that. So, but that's by default. It doesn't even ask you if you want to install BG Info now. It just does. So I'm going to go ahead and create that virtual machine. And typically, from the time I click OK there to have a new virtual machine, typically it's about 5 minutes. I could actually deploy a multi-server environment with multiple servers, 3, 4, 5 servers, in just 10 minutes, 10, 20 minutes. And so you'll see, I don't know if you can see it, but here it says starts provisioning now, and it'll actually be in a started state, a running state here in probably about 3, 4, 5 minutes at the most. So, all right, so it's that easy to create a new virtual machine. There's a lot of other stuff I don't want to go into that I don't have time, but one of the things that would be part of a design for your movement, for your GP in the cloud, is I would set up a cloud service, as I said. I would set up a virtual network. I would set up DNS, a domain controller, and there's even some other things we could do. You might notice that, for example, all of these servers and cloud services they belong to the domain cloudapp.net, which is what Azure uses to give real DNS host names to the servers and cloud services running in Azure, the cloudapp.net. So there's other things that we might design, like suggest that you put in a special DNS entry that maps this name. Let's say your company name is acme.com. You could get acme.com and create a special DNS record that maps Acme at, say, azure.acme.com to one of these DNS names, and that's all would be part of a design for a GP deployment. So okay, so there's a lot I could go over. That's all I'm going to show you here in Azure in the web interface. There's one thing that I want to point out is that Azure allows you ways to save money through automation. And so you can, for example, use the scheduler service built into Azure and create jobs and job collections. Let's say that 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 pretty much no one's on the server from midnight to 5 a.m. That maybe you're a small company and you can save money on those compute hours by automating the task of shutting your servers down automatically and bringing them back up. And I want to show an example of how that might save you money. I'm going to open a workbook I have here. Oh, hold on, whoops. And there it is. Okay. So just kind of as an example, this is a tool that I built a few months ago, just a little spreadsheet that I used to help me kind of calculate costs for GP for a job or a project or something. And one of the things I put here is, let's just say for sure that people are not going to be in the system, or you can mandate people will not be in the system from midnight to 5 a.m. So that means that, and so in this particular quote I have here, you've got your backend SQL server, your remote desktop server that costs this much. This is kind of expensive. Probably be a little bit larger system here for we could change that to maybe another Core basic A3. But you get the idea that here's the cost. This is now there's an official tool for building in cost estimates. I'm going to show you that, but we have let's just say, though, that you know that for 5 hours a day people are not going to be in the system. So you could go in and put in 19 hours, and you'll see that it reduces your cost. Or you could say, you know, people don't ever work on Sundays. And so you could just say 6 days a week, 19 hours a day, and you've taken that that cost that was pretty substantial, and you've made it less. So anyway, now I point that out because you can use automation tools to shut down your cloud services and servers and have them not running when you don't know, or even if you just only do it during the holidays, it's still you're not using compute hours when you do that. So okay, so basically, you know, we have the ability to go in. We'd set up, we can do a design, set it up so that we create your servers. Again, in a typical project, that would be a domain controller, a SQL server, and a remote desktop server, and then we would set up your accounts, set up service accounts, user accounts, and on the domain controller, and from there we can then go in. We'd attach the servers to the domain. We'd make sure they're all running on the same virtual network, and then we'd go in and install SQL services. I do want to point something out, which is that you have the ability when you're doing a new virtual machine, I'll just show you this, to go in and select, for example, I'm going to pick from the gallery again. In addition, I told you about SQL as the platform as a service. You actually, right now, you cannot use that for your SQL backend. And I don't know if Microsoft has any intention of changing that. So you have to set up a SQL virtual machine. You can't use the Azure SQL services. Now, you actually can have SQL pre-installed in an image that you set up as your virtual machine. But here's some expertise that Mig could provide for you. Don't do that. These images have SQL licensing built into them, and they're a lot more expensive than regular old just Windows virtual machines. And so what we could do is we'd set up a virtual machine. Likely, if you're a GP client and you're comfortable just saying, I'm only going to use SQL for just GP services, then we could provide the runtime license, which is free, and I could install SQL Server direct. I could do the installation of SQL Server instead of using one of the Microsoft images. So anyway, there's things that we could do to minimize cost on a GP to Azure deployment, and that would just be one example of that. Anyway, I would encourage you, anyone can get a free Azure subscription, and anyone who signs up for the first time gets, I think it's 60 days free, and there's a lot here to look into. That's all I'm going to go in terms of the web interface. The one thing I do want to show, I mentioned the automation. One of the things that I do like about Azure is I have the ability to actually automate a lot of it through scripting. So in PowerShell, for example, I can get virtual machines, and that's going to tell me what the state of my virtual machines, just as an example. So by using the tools that are available, we can kind of maximize the value that you have in Azure. The last thing I want to show you is that Microsoft has released a tool. If you were part of a project where we were migrating you to Azure, we would use a tool like this that is a cost estimator that has one big advantage in that it is updated with Microsoft's most recent prices for all their various services. So, and they're all here, virtual machines. So we'd be very thorough that if we say, here's what we've billed for you, here's what the estimated cost, our experience so far is that that estimated cost is pretty accurate. So, because we have tools like the cost estimator to help us with that. So, the one thing, oh yeah, the last thing I wanted to show you is that, so you're saying, okay, well, what would it look like? So we've deployed GP in the cloud, we've got everything set up, and your users are using it. You say, well, what does it look like? It looks like a remote desktop connection. I'm actually going to show you, in fact. This is actually GP 2015, and it is running in Azure. And it's snappy, it's responsive, it has everything that you're used to. I guess I should point out, I've been talking about remote desktop to give you access. I should point out also, though, that the web client now for GP is really awesome. And we could easily set up, either put it on one of the existing servers or set up a dedicated IIS web server and put in the GP web client, and therefore give another means of access to GP in addition to, or I'm hesitant to say as a replacement for, because the GP web client doesn't have everything, but it is something else that we could deploy, is allow you to use the web client. So here it is. This is Dynamics GP 2015 running in the cloud, and it works great. So that's all for my presentation. I think I'm going to pass the baton back over to Paris. Now.
All right, thank you very much. All right, let's get this. We just need a screen to be shown here with our, there we go, just 1 second here. Takes a second for the internet to propagate. It's taking a moment to pop up. There we go. Okay, now we're gonna, as I mentioned before, there's a question and answers panel in there, a question panel where you can enter any of your questions that you may have. Let's just give it a moment if you guys want to type in any questions that you have, and we'll just give it a moment here. And someone, okay, how about security concerns on VM or HIPAA concerns?
Actually, that's a really good question. Azure, I mean, the thing is, Azure was not the first cloud deployment, the first cloud app. First one was Amazon Web Services. Azure, however, is the first cloud provider to get HIPAA and high-tech certified, and that means they're completely compliant with all HIPAA and high-tech requirements. They were the first to be able to sign and to sign a business associate agreement, a HIPAA agreement, and they're definitely very prominent in the medical field. So that's specifically in regards to HIPAA. But I want to point out, though, that Microsoft, I have actually I've gone pretty deep in getting an understanding of how Microsoft designed their security, everything from physical security in their data centers, which is extreme. An example of their physical security is not anyone, even with a Microsoft badge, who is an employee, can go into a data center. You have to be pre-approved to be inside a data center. You can be a Microsoft employee. You can be on the Azure team, but when you go to the East US data center or the Central US data center in Chicago, or you have to be pre-approved. And if you're not pre-approved, they're not letting you in. So they're very serious about physical security, and then they have designed everything from access to the storage to the way they provision the virtual machines, to their setup for network security. Everything is very, very secure, and that's why they're HIPAA compliant, they're high-tech compliant, they're compliant with all the government requirements. They actually have dedicated data centers for the government, and there's been no incidents of any kind of serious vulnerability in Azure. It's a well-designed system.
All right. Someone just posted a question about what about customization. Can you clarify that question a little bit? What type of customization are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about GP customization specifically, you know, I'm assuming that's what the question is about. Yeah, customizations. If let's just say an example, we're doing a migration from your on-premise environment to Azure. We would make part of the project so that when we were done and you connected your remote desktop to your new GP in the cloud on Azure, that environment basically looked exactly like what you were used to. Now, if we've also done an upgrade or something, it might look a little different. But we're going to move your customizations. We're going to move your customizations, your integrations. All that is going to be part of the project, so that GP in the cloud looks exactly like what you're used to.
Okay. Yeah. Someone posted a question. What can the GP client do that the web client cannot do? That's actually kind of that's a whole different webinar. What we'll do is I'll refer you to our info@mig.com. If you can send an email there, and then we can probably set up a call to discuss that. So we'll have that. Someone else has a question here. Is it necessary to have a backup of the databases on our server? What do we need to have a DRP in the cloud?
Okay, read that sentence. Read that again.
Okay. Is it necessary to have a backup of the databases on our server? I'm assuming, do they need to have a backup on site?
Yeah. I'm assuming, let me just tell you, my assumption is that when you say our server, you mean our Azure server. It's a server, it's a server running in Azure, and that you're not talking about on-premise. The answer to the question, if a question ever begins with the words, is it necessary for us to have a backup, ... the answer is yes. Now, you have advantages in the cloud, though, because, for example, if you go with what I call the normal storage in Azure, that is a locally redundant storage. If you all the storage you use, whether it's for disks or to store SQL data and your SQL files, is locally redundant. There's at least 3 copies of that within the same data center. And you have options for regionally redundant and even geo-redundant. So let me just say that the answer is yeah, you should always back up your data, even in your data in Azure. I guess one thing I would want to point out is that in terms of your SQL backups, I'm now recommending in all our new projects that we use SQL Server 2014. And the reason being is because it has a feature where you can back up directly to the cloud. So I would, for example, set up your maintenance plans and your backups so that, and I would set up a dedicated storage account just for your backups. And when we set up SQL to do your backups, I would actually back it up directly to a separate storage account, and make it, for example, a geo or regionally redundant storage account. so that so that you have backups. But you always want to back up your data, even your data in Azure. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm just wondering if they're wondering if they needed to have it separate, one in the cloud and one on site.
Yeah, and I would say you could also back up your on-premise SQL data directly to the cloud using that feature I said. So that's another option you have. So yeah.
Okay, great. So you can use just Azure instead of having a GP on site. You can instead of having GP in the cloud, you can keep that on site, but you can still back it up on like disaster recovery that way. Okay,
sure.
And then,
exactly. Yeah.
And then what do we need to have DRP in the cloud?
What do we to have say that again?
So what do we need to have a DRP in the cloud?
DRP?
Jose, that answered the question. Could you clarify what you mean by DRP? Unless that's disaster recovery.
Oh, disaster recovery. That's probably disaster recovery. Yeah. Okay. I didn't talk about it, but there's a lot of options in Azure for disaster recovery. You have including you have the ability to set up disaster. One of the things that Microsoft's really strong is hybrid implementations, and so you can have your on-premise environment integrated with Azure. And one of the features that you have is the ability to actually have Azure create a redundant copy of your on-premise servers, or the other way around. You can create your servers in Azure and have them a redundant copy of them on-premise. So you have the ability to add these services and features. So one, there's backup as a separate service that you can just add. You can add the backup service to your virtual machines, to your cloud services. You can also add the ability to replicate an entire infrastructure, like from your on-premise to Azure, or from Azure to your on-premise or some other location. Plus, you have the ability to take advantage of the internet of the features that are already there, like your cloud storage, so you can back up to cloud storage, and it automatically gives you that redundancy. So let's just say you're planning disaster recovery. I personally think one of the best options for someone who is looking in Azure and finding out, well, how can I use it? What value could it provide to me? If I were talking about a new project, I think one of the most obvious and best uses for Azure for anyone is to plan your disaster recovery strategy to go to the cloud, so that if you needed to recover from a disaster, or even just have a few hours of downtime, you could you have a synchronized environment in Azure, and you can fail over very, very easily. So with all the built-in features in Windows and SQL and all that you have in Azure, there's multiple ways to do that. So
fair enough. Okay, that seems to be our last question. All right, so we'll just finish up here. That's the end of our Q&A period. And if you have any other ones pop up, just wanted to remind everybody that we do offer various support plans for our customers. Benefits of our MIG support plans include the fact that we support Microsoft Dynamics products, but also we support any of the third-party add-ons as well. And they're fixed-rate plans. You only pay for the plan once a year, and then there's a certain number of cases, hours, that type of thing. Some of the plans even include training and everything. There's an annual systems audit to keep us up, keep us up to speed on what changes have been made to your infrastructure, et cetera. So we're always in the latest information. And that's it. It's a really good idea. And the biggest benefit a lot of companies experience is the increased priority when it comes to support cases and such. And then also the fact that only cutting one invoice a year is a lot easier than having to, pay an invoice every time you have support. So, and we do offer various training plans as well, and we have various qualified consultants for whatever your need is, what you need to learn. There's group discounts. There's, part of the training is included in our support plans as well, some of our support plans. And it can be customized to your needs, and it's all, remote in the sense of you can have as many people in a conference room, and then you can conference in, and then it's live training and go from there. So it makes it very efficient, and very cost effective as well. And at the end of this webinar, a survey will appear. Please help us evaluate and improve our webinars by doing this. Just take a few moments to provide the feedback and go from there. And once again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. If you have any other questions or would like a little more information on how you can get moved to Azure, that type of thing, feel free to contact us at info@mig.com.